performance audit of the management of solid waste, National Solid Waste Management Authority, NSWMA.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives.
The following is a message from the Speaker of the House of Representatives to the Honourable Senate. I have the honour to advise the Honourable Senate that on the 26th day of July 2022, the House of Representatives agreed to the Senate amendments to a bill shortly entitled the Road Traffic Act 2018. Signed, Marisa Dalrymple Philibert, CD MP, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move, whereas the psilocybin mushroom is an agricultural product natural to Jamaica, and whereas a nutraceutical is defined as a food that has health-giving additives, and whereas the use of the psilocybin mushroom in spiritual health practice is being conducted as an informal industry in Jamaica with no existing standards of operation here in Jamaica, be it resolved that this Honourable Senate implores the Government of Jamaica to legitimately establish the nutraceutical psilocybin mushroom industry and standardize its operations of growth, distribution, presentation, therapeutic application, as well as the export of the psilocybin mushroom as a nutraceutical. And be it resolved that this Honourable Senate implores the government that with the establishment of this local psilocybin mushroom industry, that there will be the concomitant research, development, and revenue generation from this Jamaican nutraceutical product. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Minister.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move the following motion. The Electricity Act, the Electricity Net Billing Regulations 2022 resolution. Whereas by virtue of Section 55(1) of the Electricity Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, the Minister may make regulations to give effect to the provision of the Act, and whereas Section 55(2) of the Act provides that regulations made under the section shall be subject to affirmative resolution, and whereas on the 12th day of July 2022, the Minister made the Electricity Net Billing Regulations 2022, now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Electricity Net Billing Regulations 2022 resolution. 2. The Electricity Net Billing Regulations 2022, which were laid on the table of the Senate on the 22nd day of July 2022, are hereby affirmed. And Mr. President, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will ask for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take this motion.
Thank you, Minister. Questions and answers to questions? Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the Senate. Motions for leave to introduce bills. The presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained. Public business. Madam Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, it is intended today to pursue the completion of the debate on the road traffic regulations, which was commenced and suspended last week. As it would be recalled, I opened that debate and it was suspended pending the contribution of the opposition, and accordingly we will start with them this morning if I understand the usual practices to be observed. It is then intended to take through all its stages the act to amend the Traffic Authority Act, as well as to take the Transport Authority Act, as well as to take the net billing regulations, which were tabled last week, but for which I have just moved the resolution. It is in that context that we commence today's work. and I welcome the contributions of members on both sides. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I recognize you, Senator Dr. Floyd Morris, and recognize you from a seat other than your own, or usual seat, I should say.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I rise to make my contribution on this regulation. But, you know, before I do so, Mr. President, I must say that I am standing, beaming with joy and delight this morning after the successful performance of my niece, Danice Hakas, aka Sakaj, in the National Festival Song Final competition last night. I'm very happy for her success, and the entire St. Mary crew is elated. Whether you be from Sunside or you're from Guys Hill, once you have a St. Mary connection, you know, we are all proud of her performance. And Senator Gale and I have been sharing a private joke that I will not repeat on the floor of the Parliament. Mr. President, we on this side do support the regulations that are tabled before us, albeit us having some concerns. And I have been advised, Mr. President, that whilst we can debate the regulations, no amendments can be made. And I often wonder about such a practice in light of the fact that we are the review chamber, and you know, if we see deficiencies in the regulations, no matter how technical they are, I think that we are obligated as a chamber to make such amendments. And especially in light of the fact that we are here, different individuals in the chamber are here in their own right and have expertise in particular field, and so the knowledge in this august body is extremely profound. But nevertheless, Mr. President, I want to make some brief comments as it relates to the regulation and from the standpoint of persons with disabilities. Because as I looked at the regulation, it was a bit challenging for me to peruse, because there are a lot of tables, very difficult for the software to navigate. And so I had to find some creative ways of dealing with it. So if I speak in very general terms, please understand me and the situation that I found myself in with the particular. And I'm not blaming the team from the Parliament. It's just a difficulty in terms of converting those documents in an accessible format. And it's a systemic problem. Mr. President, I look at this section that dealt with brakes on motor vehicles, and 47 in particular. And I take note, Mr. President, that there are no provisions there that speaks to modifications for persons who have physical disabilities. And when a person with a physical disability purchases a motor vehicle, they have to do different modifications in order to drive. And one of the modifications that has to be done, especially if those individuals lose their legs, then they have to use their hands to drive, and modification has to be made to the braking system. And I thought that the regulation would make provisions for that in terms of accommodation. I think that is something that needs to be examined. Steps, the section dealing with steps 134, I never saw any provision made for hydraulic lifts for wheelchair, to accommodate wheelchair users. And it is extremely important, especially for public passenger vehicles, because this section deals with public passenger vehicles, that those accommodations and provisions be made, because in the Disabilities Act, it expressly mandates the Minister of Public Transportation to ensure that public transport is accessible for persons with disabilities. And so there is the expectation in law that, these buses would have the hydraulic lifts to accommodate persons with physical disabilities. I tell you, Mr. President, I going to the UN in Switzerland and seeing how their system operates. Every other bus that you come across is equipped with hydraulic lift to accommodate persons with physical disabilities. And I think based on our Disabilities Act, the provisions are there for the accessibility to be provided. But I don't know if the technical team captured it in the reformed regulations. And Minister, it caused me to ask the question, when we are doing these regulations, if we take a comprehensive look at other legislations that are connected to the substantive legislation, so that all the pieces are pulled together. And that is something that I think we need to take into consideration here. And the issue of hydraulic lift as a part of the provisions should have been included here. Prohibition against the parking of vehicles. Minister, when I remember when we were debating the Road Traffic Act a couple of years ago, the issue I brought to the fore, the issue of making sure that parking spaces, designated parking spaces for persons with disabilities were captured in the law. And you had said at the time that that is a regulatory situation. And I've been looking out for this particular provision in various pieces of legislation to make sure that when we have parking spaces for persons with disabilities, designated parking spaces for persons with disabilities, provisions are made in the regulation that individuals don't just come and park in those parking spaces unless it is that they can demonstrate that they have some form of disabilities. And I have had to, in the past, Mr. President, you know, I've gone elsewhere and my driver say, brand new BMW parked up in a disability parking space. He went and he checked and there was no disability sticker there. And so we decided that we were going to park right there. Because we wanted to find out who the person was. And obviously it was somebody of stature and standing who should know that they should not be parking in that disability parking spot. It so happened that when we came and checked, it was medical doctor, Senator Longmore, who was... No, it wasn't Senator Longmore. She would not do any such thing. But it was a medical doctor who was parked in the parking space. And she was huffing and puffing. And I said to her, you know, it was deliberately done because I wanted to know who it was that was parking in the disability parking, and you don't have a disability. And when I finished with her, she apologized and said lesson learned, and that she wouldn't have done it again. But it happens all the time, Mr. President. When I go to church, even at church, it happens. You know, the parking spaces are occupied by individuals who don't have a disability. And I think, Minister, you know, if we are going to build an inclusive and accessible society for persons with disabilities, and if we are going to bring life to the Disabilities Act, which was brought into effect on the 14th of February this year by the Honorable Minister of Labour and Social Security, it is prudent that regulations such as these are captured and impose penalties for individuals who violate the designated parking spaces for persons with disabilities. I humbly suggest, Mr. President, that this is an oversight that needs to be addressed. No, Minister, when you made your very comprehensive presentation last week, I mentioned, albeit sort of hush, that, you know, no provision or consideration is made for electric motor vehicles. and the noise levels therein. These motor vehicles are extremely quiet. On one hand, the legislation make provision for too much noise on our motor vehicles, but not too little noise, which the electric motor vehicles they make very little noise. I remember about 2 years ago, a friend of my wife came to the house to visit, and she was driving a very nice, luxurious electric motor vehicle. She left the house after our conversation, and within a split second, I just left the table and was going upstairs and heard a knock on the door. And it's a lucky thing we don't chat people at our house. because if we did, she would have heard us. Because she forgot something at the house and I had to turn back. But I never heard when the vehicle drove up in the driveway. And I was, between the stairway and the door separates the driveway. And I never heard. And you know, we who are blind depend on our hearing for survival. And because we depend on our hearing for survival, you know, there's a level of sharpness in the hearing. And I never heard when the vehicle drove up, and you know, I was talking to her about it, and she said that that is the nature of electric motor vehicles. And you can just imagine when we have a plethora of these motor vehicles on the road, with the lowering of the duties that have been provided to encourage electric motor vehicles, you can imagine the problem that it is going to pose for persons with visual disability. But I understand that there are devices that have been developed to ensure that, you know, there is a sound coming from those vehicles so that blind persons would be able to detect when that such vehicle is around. And I think that some provisions should be made in future regulations. Mr. President, the final point that I want to make is that when I look at the schedule, I think it's the last one that deals with a certificate. I saw a reference that internationally is recognized as offensive language to persons with disabilities, because it said something to the effect that persons suffering from a disability. Now, in terms of the languaging, we don't say suffering from a disability, because I am blind, but I am not suffering from blindness. I am not suffering from blindness in any stretch of the imagination. So the more appropriate language would be an individual who is experiencing a disability. And I think if these regulations, persons with disabilities were part of the review, then it would have avoided some of these shortcomings that I have identified. And I want to suggest, Madam Leader, that in future, when we're having these review of legislation / regulation, that we ensure, I'm not saying that it is not done, but we ensure that the views of persons with disabilities are solicited, and that the international mantra of persons with disabilities of nothing about us without us is fully observed. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Morris. Senator Gale, I am to remind you that you are to remain within the 35 minutes prescription. Senator Morris didn't require the reminder, but I'm reminding you because trade unionists are notoriously long-winded.
That's why this mic is not working. So President, I'm asking kindly if I. No, weeks time. Mr. President, you know, this piece of regulation, Jamaica as a country has been impatiently waiting for it. It has taken a long, winding road. In fact, the entire debate around the Road Traffic Act, I recall it would have started with a motion being tabled in Parliament, a joint select committee reviewing the legislation. The legislation had to go back to internal review, came back, was passed, and we're awaiting the regulations. And if you look at the size of the regulation, you would know that a lot of work was put into it. I want to commend the team from the Ministry of Transport and Mining, the AG Department, the Legal Reform, all those groups who would have been consulted. You know, the JCF, the Road Safety Unit, the Island Traffic Authority. I want to commend them, Mr. President, for the excessive hours, the sleepless nights, the long consultation for bringing these regulations to Parliament. It's long overdue, sir. And, you know, we are suffering as a country based on the indiscipline, the recklessness being demonstrated and displayed by some motorists. I woke up Sunday morning to a major accident in St. Anne between two buses. The week before, there were accidents. Many persons would have suffered. Many deaths would have taken place because of the indiscipline of motorists. Mr. President, this indiscipline must stop. You know, a few weeks ago, the government broke ground in Senator Sinclair, Western Jamaica, for what is going to be a new thoroughfare, new roadway, break ground that is going to create thousands of jobs. And I want to commend the government for the continuous effort in creating jobs in this country to reduce the unemployment rate. The roadway that is intended to be built is also intended to allow motorists and the traveling public to travel more efficiently. Mr. President, it is not intended for looseness and carelessness and reckless driving. And so these regulations are coming at the right time. We have a set of rules that would guide and direct the movement of vehicles and other road users along the roads. It also means that it is the law that guides motorists and road users in order to ensure their safety and smooth flow of traffic. The safety and the smooth flow of traffic. Mr. President, rules are very important, you know. Rules are there to protect drivers, to protect cyclists, and even pedestrians. And there are terrible consequences that are being faced with the accidents that are taking place. These unfortunate accidents that is causing serious injury and death. Mr. President, the first priority is for us to reduce these accidents and injuries. You know, we must abide by the rules. There are speed limits. We must abide by the speed limits. There are stop signs. We must pay attention to stop signs. We must give way where there are giveaway signs. What you see happening on the road is not only a sense of indiscipline, but a sense of impatience. A sense of impatience. You're at a traffic light waiting for the light to be changed. And as soon as the light changes, you hear people behind you blowing you. The level of impatience that takes place with our motorists. It's important also that outside of these restrictions, these regulations, you know, we must have signs of directions. You know. There are times in this country where you can, if you're going somewhere, you're going there because you know you're going because of the directions of signs. Now you have GPS. Not everybody can use GPS. So we still need the maintenance of these signs on the roadway to give directions. One of the other challenges is that, you know, we have a lot of construction and infrastructural work taking place on our roadways. Sorry, you know, this is disabling me, child. Floyd.
You want to switch seats again? You're suffering from a disability?
Well, I'm not suffering from it, but experience it. And so, you have in place all this infrastructural work, but you're not having adequate signs to warn you, those warning signals. Mr. President, there are areas in the regulation that, you know, I want to raise, not concerns, but I want to highlight. I think it's section 5 that deals with the instructors. A lot of work was put in, extensive work, to shape and to regulate how instructors operate. Not everybody can be not everyone can teach to drive, teach to drive. And so a lot of work was put in treating with this particular area, extensive work. And I want to commend the team for the review that was done. Mr. President, Clause 237 page, right. Electronic monitoring and surveillance. Now, I consider this an enhanced mechanism to support the capturing of these villains on the road, these reckless drivers. 238 speaks to the offenses detected by electronic enforcement device. And I really hope that these devices are put in place, so that they can work.
Yeah. Most important.
Now,
most important.
238, it breaks down the areas of monitoring. A speaks to exceeding the applicable speed limit. B, disobeying a traffic signal. C, driving in an unauthorized lane, such as a bus lane. D, making improper turns. And E to H speaks of, the motor vehicle. There is a new tendency that I believe is not captured. New tendency. A new type of offense that you see every day, if you really notice it. You come up to the intersection, and there's a filter lane to your right. And especially the taxis, the robot taxis, carrying more passengers than it should be carrying.
It shouldn't be carrying at all.
They come up on your right speeding. And when the light says green, they cut in front of you. Mr. President, for consideration in the future, I believe there should be an insertion or an addition that treats with the improper usage of the filter lane.
True.
The improper usage of the filter lane. It is one of the major indiscipline that is experienced. They not only cut on the right, on the left, you have the filter that leads to the left. What they do is to cut into that and turn on the exit to get back into the traffic. And I'm hoping that what is contained in 238 can capture them. Stop this recklessness. Mr. President, 221 speaks to another group that is of concern to me. Protective and safety gear for motorcycle drivers, pedal cyclists, and pillions. 2 weeks ago, I was coming from Portmore, and that long stretch that leads to the Mandela. There was a cyclist that passed. That's what I call it. Whiz pass. No helmet, no shirt, no footwear, wheeling along the way. Wheeling? Yeah, man. I ended up on the Washington Boulevard at an intersection. And I was in the left lane, and the same cyclist, the same thing hit my mirror. Proceeded to break through the light. And then I went up Constant Spring Road. And I heard the bike coming again. And when I look, it's the same cyclist.
Wow. You open your door?
Same cyclist. And he proceeded to break the light at Mary Brown's corner and head back down Constant Spring Road. Now, coming all the way from Portmore, you want to tell me that not one motorized patrol would have seen this cyclist, no helmet. No, I'm coming to another thing, because when you raise concern, because I've raised concern with the JCF about it, and the response is that, why we can't catch them? Because they're moving so fast. So, President, there has to be some regulation in treating with them. There has to be. The other thing is in 40, Mr. President, 40 wheel projection. No portion of the wheel or fitting of a motor vehicle shall project more than 9 centimeters beyond the extreme outer face of the body of the vehicle when the tire is fully inflated. I see some vehicles, and when I look at the rim, there are protrusions of sharp instruments. The trucks especially. Well, it's sharp instrument, and I think I never get a chance to measure it, but I think it's dangerous, and it's not needed. And even if that vehicle is parked and someone's walk close to it, you are exposed to the risk of injury. President, we have these regulations. The call I'm making today is I'm calling for the use of this in regards to enforcement. The use of it in terms of enforcement. I'm also calling and supporting the push and the encouragement for the cyclists to wear the helmets. Wear the helmet. And if you're an employer and you employ cyclists, part of your rule is to insist that they wear helmets. Well, it was announced last week by the minister that the sale of the motorcycle includes a helmet. My concern is not the sale with the helmet. My concern is that the helmet must be worn.
And for passengers.
And for the pillion riders must wear helmet. But I want us to exercise the use of the regulations. And we must ensure that what is being established here, compiled here, intended to pass, must be enforced. For the safety of motorists, for the safety of the traveling public, for the safety of pedestrians. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Gale. Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr. President.
And I must say that we have missed you.
And so he can use all those days.
Mr. President, I miss you all too. Along the way, like my colleague Senator Allen, the COVID visited on us. But we have, like President Biden, have overcome it. And we're here. And we're happy that we were fully vaccinated, though I can't say I was boosted. Mr. President, Like Senator Gill, I know the delay in bringing the regulations. I can't say, Senator Gill, I'm commending anybody for bringing it now. Sunday, the tragic accident in St. Anne now count 4 fatalities. Every year since 2018, when we passed the legislation, the Road Traffic Act, every year I've seen more fatality than the year before. Clearly, we are continuing to go in the wrong direction. My condolences goes out to the families of those who died on Sunday and those who have died before in traffic accidents.
Senator Brown, allow me just to say, I was going to mention it after, since you just mentioned it there, just to indicate to you that, in fact, in that accident, a member of the electoral office, Mr. Pommels, succumbed to injuries that he received in that accident. His name is Mr. Conrad Pommel, and in fact, 6 other members of staff of the Electoral Commission were injured. They were in fact going to work in St. James. Mr. Pommel was a person who was critical to the operation of the Commission, as he was someone who dealt with technology at the Commission. So I join with you in offering condolences to all the persons who met their demise or who were injured in that particular accident. But of course, I would crave your indulgence to speak specifically to Mr. Pommel's family and offer the condolences of the Senate and to the members of staff of the Electoral Commission who were on the job doing the work of the Electoral Commission. Senator Bunting, you remember Mr. Pommel? You refer to him as Tiny. Yeah, he died, you know, he died in that accident. Yes, so it's a dreadful tragedy for us as a commission, and I'm sure on behalf of the Senate and members of the staff, offer the condolences to the Electoral Commission, and of course to the other persons who died in that tragic accident. Thank you. I'm sorry to have interrupted you, Senator.
No, that's fine, President. We all share the same thing. The pressure, the burden, the suffering that the families go through in circumstances like these. And so I'm happy to I'll take that interruption. I hope it's the only interruption in my 35 minutes. I'm happy to take that interruption because we're tired of the death on the road. Somebody like Lucian Jones, who is the conscience of the nation, he cries almost every time. He laments the delay in bringing these regulations. And I hope sincerely that these regulations are going to make the difference. I well recall when we debated the Act in December 2018 in this chamber. My colleague Senator Skeffrey was here, and he too has connected, like Bunting before, with the Electoral Commission, and I'm sure he would be sending his own condolences, and he will express it, I'm sure, in that appropriate body. Senator K.D. Knight was here. We asked for some time, but the government was in a rush to bring the legislation into place. And they told us then, President, that within 3 months of December 2018, the legislation will be in place. so we couldn't delay for a week. The mayor had to stop. I remember that grand speech. In fact, we were told that the draft regulation, Senator Gill, if I quote the Gleaner correctly, the draft regulations are almost complete. That's December 2018. We were told, President, and I quote from the Gleaner of the 7th of December 2018, that the minister, government leader, said that the government will use the time to embark on a public education campaign to ensure that everybody understands what is coming, to ensure that the public is made aware of the changes, and make sure that the operations and system of the government side are put in place to support the effective implementation of the Act. What caused this failure on the part of the government to have brought these regulations earlier? I hope it's not the staff that is going to be blamed, because the government gave the country an undertaking that they'll bring these regulations within 3 months. It's now almost 4 years, and the regulations are just coming. And what is worse, President, there's uncertainty as to when, Senator Gill, these regulations are going to be implemented, become effective, much less enforced. Because what sense it makes to have such a big book, but they're not enforced? Hundreds of pages of regulations, but the taximan, the busman, the motorist doesn't enforce it. President, the stop sign at the top of Duke Street was my first encounter with the Road Traffic Act. I paid $123 in the arbitrary court, $123. So you must know how long that is. But Senator Fraser Binns, Senator Allen, Senator Scott Motley, Senator Gabriel Morris knows that if I'm in the car with them, when they get to that stop sign, I ask that all 6 wheels, the 4 on the car, the spare and the steering wheel, come to a full stop.
Every time.
I reinforce that in my children. Whichever stop sign they see, they must honor. Because that was an enforcement that taught me that lesson. But as long as we continue to have the regulations, have the act, not enforce, we're not going to get the results we want. And so we supported the act. We will support the regulations. But we need a buy-in into these regulations. And the public education we were promised within 3 months haven't come yet. I do not know, President, if the public education is ready now. As I say, we don't even know which part of the regulation is going to be implemented when. I'd have hoped the government to have given us a timetable saying part 1, part 5, part 7 will be implemented on such and such a date. Part 9 and 8 and 10 will be implemented on such and such a date. So the people are not sure when this big book will take effect. Which part of the big book will take effect when? So, to me, that uncertainty would indicate that the government is not ready. I do not know, President, if we are going to get the necessary public education that we were promised. And that is needed, because that public education will lead to a buy-in. Well, first informing the citizen of what the regulations say, and hopefully a buy-in by the citizen. But I'm aware, President, that public education requires funds. And when I look at what is happening with Jamaica 60, I'm wondering if the funds are available. When I look at the state of garbage collections, I'm wondering if the funds are available to go into public education. But Mr. President, I am not yet aware, and I'm waiting for an answer from the Office of the Prime Minister, as to what was the cost of the campaign in Kigali. Because we had money for that. We had money to compete as Secretary General of the Commonwealth. I hope that money will not impact, which we spend an undisclosed sum, will not impact the public education that is necessary and the funding of the public education that is so important to crush and reduce the mayhem and the anarchy that we see on the road. President, there are a few points in the regulation that I want to draw some attention to. Senator Morris has made the point that we can't amend the regulations in the Senate, nor in the House. It's for the minister. It's the minister's regulations. But we hope that what we say here will be taken into account. And I make that point also for another reason. Because there are those who are lobbying, and I agree with them, about this age 70 restrictions. Maybe it should be 75 like other countries. Maybe there ought to be a discussion with the people in that age group so that they don't feel that we are planning against age. I'm pretty close to the 70, President, as you know. But I'm not making a representation for myself. There are people out there who express the concern, and maybe something the minister should revisit. I see there's discussion on one of the radio stations, and people should be given an opportunity in the public education to address that, even though that's not specifically in the regulation, but that sailed away in the Act in 2018. But last week we were amending the Act. So we should consider the concerns being raised, and if need be, to amend the Act in respect to the age and the impact of people coming to age 70 and requiring more frequent tests and restrictions. Here in the bill that came up a couple of times in the regulation that is of concern to me is the power of the minister to make orders. In clause 234, I think that deals with speeding. 234 deals with speed. 235 deals with 235 I believe deals with breathalyzer, and 237 deals with the electronic monitoring, and I'll say a little more about the electronic monitoring. President, when you look at the sections, there's in some cases a D and an F which says any other equipment approved by order by the minister. So the minister can just, by order, says, I'm going to use X equipment without coming to the Parliament. The legislation as it is now, the regulation says, it specifies the equipment that should be used in speeding, in measuring speed, in measuring the breath, and in dealing with the electronic equipment. However, it gives this excuse where the minister can, by order, as it says in 234, any other equipment approved by order by the minister. In 237, in 235, 230, that's 234, and we said 235. Yes, it says, it outline it, and then it says at 235 1C, any other equipment approved by order by the minister. It does the same in 237 1D. If Senator Campbell, and there are two over there, yeah, three was plenty. If the Parliament, right now police can't go and use one that is not named here. Otherwise, that's just not, it's a nullity. If the minister can by order change what the Parliament says should be, then it should come back to Parliament, minister. Whether by way of a negative resolution or by way of an affirmative resolution. And this is why I believe the power of the minister. And when I was on that side, I argued against too much power for ministers. It should come back to the Parliament, since the Parliament says what can be used now. And there are a couple of reasons why I share this view, President. When I see how we handle the second-hand vehicles for the police, something that Senator Bunting described as the mother of all bandulos, I am weary of giving these powers to make orders on matters like these, expensive issues, to ministers without oversight of the Parliament. I well recall, Senator Samuel not here, but you'd recall that I raised the issue of the portable X-ray machine to detect guns in vehicles. A minister made an order, different order. Certainly the ministry made an order for some. It turned out that the specifications were wrong, too heavily radioactive, money, taxpayers' money was paid.
This is the third time that you have digressed from the subject before, and I've allowed you a certain latitude. Please deal with the regulations that are.
But that's what I'm dealing with.
No, you're not.
President, I'm explaining why I do not support this clause. When Senator Gale spoke about road and work being created by government and coming in the government, well, this is a build-up to it.
I'm just saying that you have digressed on three occasions.
President, I am saying I do not support the power of the minister to make order.
You have digressed on three occasions, and I have allowed you a certain amount of latitude. Just stick to the regulations.
That's what I'm doing.
You are not.
President.
Senator Gale, I don't need any assistance here, you know.
President, I do not support 237D, 1D. I do not support 234, 1F. And I do not support, it's Australian. And I do not support 235, 1C, because I believe it gives too much power to ministers, where history has shown that ministers have acted contrary to the best interests of the taxpayers. I cite two examples. I don't need to dwell on it beyond that, but it's connected to the regulations, and I'm not going to be shaken from putting my views. So I do not support these, and I ask that any order made by the minister to change the equipment be brought back to the Parliament. Parliament must have oversight over the executive as a fundamental principle of our democracy. And I believe, therefore, we should not leave it up to President. At 239, it speaks to, that's page 108, 239(1). And in case you say this is not regulation related, the regulation said the authority may enter into arrangements for the utilization of privately owned electronic detection device to be installed on or near a road. What does this mean? Is it that we're going to say to the toll operators, here is a new stream of revenue for you because they are private? Is it that this is going to be set up elsewhere? What arrangements? Will these arrangements come to Parliament so we know what they are? Because certainly the used car didn't come to Parliament, and that was an arrangement. The handhelds portable didn't come to Parliament, and that was an arrangement. So what I'm saying, based on these regulations, any private individual or own electronic device, one, will they conform with those that are now required in the regulations, or the minister will then also have authority to make an order to conform with the private own electronic device? We need some explanation on this. How will it work? Does it mean, for example, that a toll operator is now going to be able to, and it happens now, keep the camera on every car pass? Or will the toll operator know which car Senator Campbell is insured? That means access to some database. Or if not the toll operator, which private own will then get access to a database about insurance? Because that's one of the offense, driving a car without insurance, driving a car without license. How is this going to operate? And I have a little difficulty just rubber stamping a regulation like this, which gives private owned people the right to monitor and to cause prosecution. In some cases, these private owned people may be foreigners. In this case, some of these are foreigners. Are we going to be allowing these foreign people to be able to access all of this data? So any such arrangement, I contend, President, should come to the Parliament. In other words, the Parliament must have oversight of these things. It can't be left up to ministers. Ministers have made so many errors of judgment on all sides. Don't come tell me. All sides have made so many errors of judgment that could have been cured by public debate in the Parliament. And so I make those things. Final one, President, the regulations require that you must have your vehicle certified every year. The transport people, Island Transport Authority, I say you must now do this online. So recently a friend of mine told me that he sought to register, to do online. Sorry? To book and pay for an appointment online. But in so doing, an error was made. Instead of citing the vehicle as a private vehicle, it was cited as a commercial vehicle. When he went to the depot, he was told it's an error. He said, can I change it? And says, no, can't change it. Can I get a refund? The answer is no. So, Senator Abraham, once upon a time I would call it highway robbery, but now I have to call it online robbery. It cannot be for the state to benefit from a mistake like that. This is an administrative issue. And I'm calling on the Island Transport Authority to fix it so the Jamaican citizens are not end up in a position where they call in a government a chopper government. Because that sounds like a scam. Because an error is made. Certainly in a private sector business, if I made an error like that, we'd all be saying, refund the person. But our government can't set the lead in taking people money for doing nothing. Although that's the norm, it seems, sometimes. So, I'm asking you, Minister, and I'm glad you are here with us still, that God has been good to all of us in not wanting to leave our country yet. That I ask that this administrative issue that this administrative issue be addressed. It's not anywhere in the law or in the regulation that you must lose your money. It seems to be an administrative failing, and people shouldn't suffer because they made a mistake like that. So, President, at long last the regulations have come, but knows not when they will be effective. Not like some legislation when the GG signed it. No, GG doesn't have to sign this. But the government has said, through the minister in the other place, that this will be implemented in phases. So, Minister, it will be good. We know it's not 3 months anymore. But it would be good if the population of the country, not me, the population of the country can be told which parts of these regulations, which parts are going to be implemented when, effective when, so the people can know. In closing, President, I recall standing right where I am now and saying the government would not bring the regulations before the last elections. I was right. I hope these will be implemented before the next elections. It is really, Minister, in the hands of the government. 3 months pass. Let it not be 3 more months, leading into 4 years before we get these regulations. We all want the mayhem to stop. I am sure my colleague, Senator Bunting, will point out the issues of lack of enforcement and issues like those. We are all for cleaning up the roads, bringing order. But you can't talk a tough talk and not willing to implement these. People must know, if you use your cell phone, know the regulations say it's an offense, as the act has done, and it's a big fine. So let us work together, Minister, to get this in place. There's no fundamental disagreement. My concern is about the Parliament maintaining oversight of the minister, because ministers make mistakes, even if it's not in the regulation. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Brown. Senator Waby.
Mr. President, thank you very much. Thanks, Alan. Mr. President, colleagues, good morning. Mr. President, I must confess that I'm a little bit hurt that when I stood, you did not caution me in terms of my time.
No, because I looked very closely at your speech and noticed that that could never take over 35 minutes to deliver. I noted it.
I think I'm going to surprise you this morning. Anyway, morning again, everyone. Morning to my fellow senators. Mr. President, I rise to contribute to the debate on the Road Traffic Regulations 2022. And let me start off by saying I wholeheartedly support these regulations. As said before by all of my colleagues, it has taken a very long time for the regulations to get to this stage. Having said that, I really want to use this opportunity, Mr. President and my fellow colleagues, to commend and congratulate the Honourable Minister of Transport and Mining, Audley Shaw, for making this legislation a priority since his appointment earlier this year. Thanks, Audley. And he has been on record, and I think there's an article in today's newspaper where he's really focusing on trying to remove the indiscipline on our roads. I think that when these regulations are passed, colleagues, it will go a long way in restoring law and order on our nation's road. You know, as I reflected on the Road Traffic Act and the regulations, and I thought about it carefully, Senator Bunting, this is a bigger issue than debating a Road Traffic Act or a regulation. This is actually a symptom of the general behavior of our citizens. It is clear to me, observing not only on the roads but otherwise, that our beloved country Jamaica, there's a breakdown of law and order in our society. Mr. President, many years ago, I think I was probably in college or just out of, to be precise, 1994, then Prime Minister P.J. Patterson announced what was described as a Values and Attitudes Program. And I quote, a national strategy and program of actions to promote attitudinal change and social renewal. I thought, as a young Jamaican at the time, that was a great initiative that, as my grandma would say, help good old Jamaican values to come back again. Mr. President, the truth is, we need to instill positive values and attitudes in our basic schools and in every classroom in Jamaica, and respect for each other. When I was in school, Senator Crawford, civics was standard. It was mandatory in every classroom that you have to do civics in schools. Mr. President, my own experience as a youngster learning civics, it helped me to learn skills and utilize those skills, knowledge and attitude that will prepare us as Jamaicans to be competent and responsible citizens of our country. It is my opinion that civics needs to be reintroduced as a part of the school curriculum to indicate the characteristics of good citizenship in our society. Everybody has said it that has contributed to this debate. Daily, I observe the disgraceful behavior of some road users, the blatant disregards for stop signs, pedestrian crossings, and speed limits. And what is very concerning, Mr. President and colleagues, it is almost becoming the norm. Can you imagine that? It is almost becoming the norm to see cars breaking the stop signs and speeding. What a sad state of affairs. Mr. President, what I find amazing too is that drivers with heavily tinted windows in contravention of the law, and when you look at the news and the crime scenes, a lot of these vehicles are the same one with the heavily tinted vehicles. What an amazing state of affairs. Chairman, Sir President, a breakdown in common courtesies when using the road reflects the current state of the moral fabric of our society. the indiscipline and selfishness that has resulted in loss of lives. It has caused great grief and pain for many Jamaicans who have lost loved ones in circumstances that could have been avoided. What struck me, Mr. President and colleagues, when the debate on the regulations last week by Senator Johnson Smith, who gave a really, really good presentation. Congratulations, leader. And she referred to, with her own emotions, of the several headlines on the road accidents. And in preparing my presentation within a week, there are so much more. There are so much more within a week. 12-year-old dies in Trelawney, motor vehicle crash, July 26, 2022. Another victim succumbs following a two-bus collision in St. Anne. And President, may I use this opportunity to express my own condolences to the EOJ on that horrific accident. Man killed in Mandela Highway crash identified July 28, Jamaica Gleaner. I went back to look at the numbers of people losing their lives on the road. Senator Bunting, 483 persons lost their lives in motor vehicle accidents in 2021. In 2020, 412 persons lost their lives. And in 2019, 438 Jamaicans were killed in accidents. You know, apart from the loss of lives, the economic cost of vehicle crashes is significant, and I'll expand on that a little bit. In doing further research in terms of the economic impact, if you look at a study done by the World Health Organization, they estimate that road traffic crashes cost most countries 3% of the gross domestic product. And if I were to get Senator Gill for Jamaica, I think it would have been, it is higher. An industry that I'm involved in, I asked the industry heads just to give me an idea of some of the costs. Senator Brown, you know, data is important, as you always say. Listen to these numbers, colleagues, and sometimes when you put it on paper, it's kind of astonishing. In 2021, the insurance industry incurred 14 billion Jamaican dollars of motor claims, a 10% increase in 2020. 10.9 billion, or 77% of this amount, is due to physical damage of motor vehicles and for third party, and 3.2 billion, or 23%, is attributed to bodily injury. That 23% is significant. Can you imagine, Senator Sinclair, the stress that has put on our hospital systems? When without the accidents, we're already stressed. And when you're talking about 23%, or 3.2 billion, that is significant. And as of June of this year, the industry had claims of 8.5 billion. This is a 21% increase compared to the corresponding period in 2021. And Senator Bunting, you'll understand, of that 8.5 billion, a lot of it is foreign exchange. Most of it, a scarce commodity that we have already. And you're talking about 8.5 billion, reinsurance and buying the parts to come in. So, Mr. President, it is clear that it cannot be business as usual. So I'm in full support of these regulations to overhaul the framework for the use of our nation's roads to ensure that we can go on with our daily lives. Mr. President, and I think it was said by one of my colleagues before, we in the Parliament can be passing the best laws possible, and we do our homework and our hard work. But if they are not enforced, we are wasting time. That is the bottom line. If they are not enforced, we are wasting time. But here's the solution, Mr. President. I am suggesting that technology can be a useful tool in fact, the game-changing tool for enforcing these laws. I read an interesting article, Senator Fraser Binns, and there's a phrase that I found quite amusing coming from our culture. And it's actually an IDB article that was posted on their website. And it says, and I'm quoting, paper-based ticketing systems are not only inefficient, paper-based, which we are using now, but they represent an opportunity for point-of-service corruption. I found that phrase, point-of-service corruption, very interesting. Mr. President, I believe the use of technology, as I said before, can create efficiency and effectiveness in traffic enforcement while easing the strain on the security forces and the justice system. Other benefits are an increase in revenue collection and the promotion of transparency by reducing opportunities for corruption. You know, a study by the London School of Economics and Political Science over the period 1992 to 2016 found that speed cameras, Senator Campbell, reduced accidents by between 17 and 39%, and fatalities between 58 to 68% within 500 meters of the cameras. So we're on to something here in terms of data. In countries like the United States and the United Kingdom, traffic cameras are basically located, as most of us would know, at every major traffic signal to detect offenses, and tickets are issued automatically at that stage. I believe that we have a great opportunity to expand the use of the Jamaica Eye in a strategic way that we can replicate what is done in the first world to help restore law and order in our society, to apprehend lawbreakers. The most significant initiative for me, certainly, is the Traffic Ticketing Management System, TTMS, which is an e-ticketing system which was piloted in December 2021 and, by all reports, has shown signs of success. I stand here today and say that if we execute TTMS well, it's going to be a game changer for the Jamaican society. I really believe that. My understanding is that the software was developed through a joint effort, which is very heartwarming, of eGov Jamaica, the Ministry of National Security, the Jamaica Constabulary Force Technology Branch, and Public Safety and Traffic Enforcement Branch. I really want to congratulate the government on this initiative. This is an example, a great, great example of how various arms of government can work together for efficiency, productivity, and ultimately for the greater good of the country. We must be realistic, colleagues and President, about the capabilities of the Jamaica Constabulary Force, because they have limited resources. We just simply don't have enough police officers to be at every stoplight and intersection. That is why I'm so big on the use of technology to help us through this crisis. The traffic cameras and other electronic devices must be priority one. We need a data-driven traffic law enforcement system. So we look at what offenses are most prevalent across the island and then deploy technology for the detection and prosecution of these offenses. Lawbreakers must be convinced. Let me say this again. Lawbreakers must be convinced that if they commit the crime, they will be apprehended and punished. How can a person with over 1,000 tickets be allowed to operate a motor vehicle? That's a question. How can a person with over 1,000 tickets be allowed to operate a motor vehicle? Mr. President, we must fix this broken system. My understanding is that all traffic tickets issued with the devices that support the traffic ticketing management system will be instantly uploaded to the centralized database that is accessible by the JCF, the traffic courts, and all government agencies that depend on accurate, timely traffic information to fulfill their mandates. What is also great is that the tickets will be available on payment online with a short time frame. Senator Brown, when you are introducing a new system, you're going to have your challenges. You're going to have some teething pains. What is important, and I think that's where you were going, is that when you pick up these challenges or issues, that they are quickly resolved. Quickly, and I have no argument with that. So this can be a game changer, and I'm looking forward to a definitive timeline for the full rollout of the TTMS. Mr. President, the truth is, and I was having a sidebar with my fellow colleague, Shireen Golding Campbell. The truth is, as we stand here, each of us has a responsibility, whether as drivers or owners, to ensure that our roads are safe. Enforcement is not easy to accomplish in any country, but it works. I recall when Senator Allen, when the Road Traffic Act was amended in 1999, maybe you're a little too young to remember, mandating that we wear a seatbelt. And there was a big uproar about these changes, and Jamaican culture about seatbelt and that kind of thing. But here is the data again that enforcement works. Just before the study, just prior to 1999, a study was done in 1996 which showed that only 21.1% of private motor vehicle drivers wore a seatbelt and 13.6% of front seat passengers voluntarily wore seatbelts. A cross-sectional study was done in 2004, and it showed that seatbelts were being used by 81.2% of private motor vehicles and 74% of front seat passenger vehicles. So that figure, since the law was introduced, moved from 21.1% to 81.2%. And that study was done in 2004. I would submit to this Honourable House that that figure is significantly higher now. So this issue about culture and Jamaican, if we have a system of enforcement, we will get alignment. So in my mind, Mr. President, this is a positive indication that sustained enforcement will reap success, and mindsets can change and will change. What we witnessed here was a cultural, in my mind, Senator Crawford, basically a cultural transformation. And I'm sure these figures, as I said before, are high. As I stand here, and I've done a lot of research on the regulation on the Traffic Act, I feel very confident, Mr. President, that properly enforced on the use of technology, this will go a far way in restoring law and order in our beloved country. Before I sit, let me say, Mr. President and colleagues, we must continue to work together as a nation, and we will see the well-needed change in road user behavior. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Waby. Senator Crawford.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. Mr. President, unfortunately, this morning I was reminded of some of the stories my students told me when my computer went down, the dog ate my homework. And despite restarting, I could not find what is called the autosave. So some of the subsections and stuff like that I would not be able to highlight as I'm going off memory. I see the look on your face, Mr. President.
So you need an extra.
I need, yes. But I see the look on the president's face. It looks like my face when the students told me that they lost their homework. I was quite distraught. But Mr. President, in the presentation last week, the leader of government business suggested that this is long awaited by the public. And I would posit that if this is so, the public awaits this with the assumption that its implementation will lead to a reduction in the negatives faced by the society as it relates to improper use of motor vehicles and the roads. Mr. President, that carried me to the question of what really is the core purpose, what's the core objective, what's the major outcome that the government intends to achieve from the implementation of this bill. And I beg to correct myself to say objectives, because it is not necessary that there is only a single objective. Mr. President, more and more research is being done in governments having an objective of raising revenue from efforts such as ticketing systems. In fact, well, you know, you hear me say it. I might just say, in fact, that is not the intent of this government. You don't hear us say it. But there's more and more evidence. There's more and more evidence that governments has as a objective, one of their objectives, the revenue that can be earned from ticketing systems. In fact, last year, the Economic and Social Survey of Jamaica suggested that in 2021, the government of Jamaica raised $968 million from issuing 476,879 tickets. Now, what I'm saying, Mr. President, is that no government should allow itself to be dependent on the funds raised from deterrent activities, because that may hinder the motive for implementation. I'm not suggesting that this is the case with this government. I'm trying to highlight the risk of being dependent on this $1 billion. In fact, Senator Waby, it doesn't only exist in the ticketing system for motor vehicles, but whenever you speak to increasing the tax on the cigarette, for example, the companies that participate in that space would speak to the revenue that government may lose. In fact, currently we're speaking about sugary drinks and the tax on sugary drinks. And those entities and even the government's conversation is what is the trade-off in the revenues that you may lose. And so when you look at these things, the government should never be dependent for its basic functions on the funds raised from the implementation, because the intent should be zero offenses. The government's intent, the government's best case should, I'm sorry? I'm not. All right. I think it's because I'm saying the government. So a government intent should be zero cases. A government intent should be that anything raised from the breaking of rules or the participation in actions wanted to be deterred by the government is an addition and not a necessity. In this current circumstance, this $1 billion was not directed in the reports to activities to hinder the participation. And Senator Golding, I would just want you to understand that if it is that you need $1 billion for implementation, it may impact how high you put the trust it may impact what is the fee that you put, because your revenue is based on price plus quantity. There needs to be a certain amount if you're dependent. So therefore, what I would like to see in a society that is raising up to $1 billion is that this $1 billion is directed to activities that may achieve the goal that the ticketing system, because the ticketing system in and of itself will not solve the problem. There are other issues that can be aligned that may solve the problem. And so if we commit this $1 billion, Senator Waby spoke about the seat belts. And I would put it to you that an additional reason for this increase is the greater awareness that the society have about life-saving impacts of seatbelt. And so therefore more, and one of the things is we are now benefiting from other people's spend, like the United States who are watching cable, and we see their communication and internet and more deaths and lives saved and more information. And so therefore the promotion of proper road usage becomes a benefit as well as the law itself. In fact, many of us, even without the fear of being caught, now put on our seatbelt and tell our children to put on the seatbelt, not for the ticket, but for the life-saving that we have now perceived to be a part of our consciousness. But what are the things we want? I would like to propose, sir, and one of the reasons we're debating this is because there are fines. And so therefore the conversation around the fines and the revenues raised on the fines is very important, because it is one of the reasons it is before us today. Is that we have negated, and Senator Waby alluded to it, civics was in school, Senator Waby. That is true. But we have also, as a society, not used the period that we have the majority of our citizenry captive. That all of us goes through the school experience. Some of this $1 billion raised from the ticketing system should be dedicated, in my opinion, to having road classes or whatever that is called, driving ed, in schools. If it's even just the academic portion, so that our citizens, that might not have been necessary in 1983 when you hear an engineer says Mass Jank, all him have a car. Now that everybody and him granny have a car or an access to a vehicle, it seems to me necessary that within our school systems, we could fund the driving ed. And I'm not sure of how much hours exposure you may need. So it may be that it is for a term, it may be it is for a half a term, or whatever it is, that at least, and now that you have, my great senator, all these artificial intelligence, that you don't have to drive a car, you have simulation and all of that. $1 billion a year, some of that should be used to this effort. Indeed, it is my opinion that if our students are exposed, because one of the reasons I promote education and marketing, societal marketing, is because I presume that they want to do good. But a lot of times, a lack of knowledge, a lot of times that this is how it is done, having observed it being done in this way. You can imagine a new taximan. He drives how him think taximan drive, because this is how it is done. And so counter information, because they want to be correct, it can assist in changing that. So therefore, if it is that we could have a dedication of the funds raised to the alleviation of the negativity that we want, one method that can be done is to implement driving education in schools, all fifth farmers, and road education and safety and road use, and to fund that, the specific teachers or the specific implements, through this $1 billion, Senator Bunting, that we have raised.
Yeah, good point.
The minister last week also, so I hope we understand the context that I was setting when I say revenue for necessities should not be a objective, or the government shouldn't be dependent, even if it is not the objective, shouldn't be dependent on this revenue. The other thing the minister rightfully spoke to, and I quite enjoyed her presentation, was the number of children that died And one of the major road users within our society are children. Because if you take out some of the adults who are unemployed, worse now we can work from home, a child basically must use the road at least twice to go to school and come back 5 times a day. Unless they're homeschooled. So the majority of our children would use it at least 5 times a day.
5 times a week.
A week, 5 times a week. 2 times a day, 5 times a week. The majority of our children. And thank the Lord we have Google and those things, because in Senator Braham's time, they would have to also go to the library on a Saturday. Myself as well, Tom Redcove Library and all of those things.
That's where he said he went, right?
Yeah. We couldn't find it. But what I'm saying as well, Mr. President, is this 1 billion could also be dedicated to alleviating the transportation issues being faced by our students, in particular our rural students who must travel very, very far distances. On many occasions, we have heard of a taxi carrying 5 students. The last one I can remember was from Edith Dalton and had an accident with Homewood and had an accident. And so, therefore, if this billion was not needed to pay doctors and nurses and teachers, if we did not find some political benefit from saying no new taxes, and therefore seek to use some of these funds raised to supplement our budgetary needs, then we could legitimately have a school bus system subsidized by this traffic fine system. And that might even encourage more of us to pay the fines, because we can see that it is not just government oppression, but efforts to actually alleviate some of the negativities that we're facing on the road. And these are not just because in government the neck bone connected to the shoulder bone and the shoulder bone connected to the backbone. If in yes, and you hear the word of the Lord. But if you depend on syntaxes and citizens' negative behavior for income, you are then going for necessities. You are then going to be deterred from implementing supplementary and supporting activities that can reduce the negative. Like, for example, having our students in totality. In 5 years, we would have had 200 a year. That's a graduating cohort. 200 a year times 5, we would be 200,000 a year. So that's 1 million Jamaican citizens would have been exposed to road safety. Is it 200,000 now? 40-something thousand a year in each cohort. Okay, so it's 200,000 in total is at the school. So in 5 years, if we do 1 year group, 5th form only, we would have had 40,000 Jamaicans who have been exposed. So you got 200,000 Jamaicans who have been exposed 5 times 40,000 to driving education, road safety, and road usage. And being what they call a going concern, the country not ending anytime soon. Imagine in 20 years what we would have in road usage and road operations and stuff like that. If we can separate our students so that they can take the school bus or whatever transportation system, especially the rural ones that might have 4 or 5 different stops to make or taxis to take. Senator Bunting, I experienced that area in St. Thomas recently that said they must take 2 taxis. 1 big bus in the morning and then another taxi to get to school in St. Thomas, coming from St. Thomas. The way that you access this area in St. Thomas was to drive through the hills of St. Andrew and then go to, so no high school was in that vicinity. They had to now leave out. And so that exposure was a problem. So I am suggesting once again that we use some of this 1 billion and dedicate it to the promotion of safety and what is safe and the risk, on the driver's education in schools, and on the school bus system for our students. As well, Mr. President, within the bill itself, I saw some things that I found to be great concern, one of which is a focus regulations on age. One of the things with the focus on age was that I saw where there was a section to say that a person 70 and over would need to provide a medical certificate every 3 years. However, despite the research that I did, I saw no reason to perceive that a 70-year-old was a higher risk. There was no greater accident outcome from a 70-year-old. So therefore, even if we perceive that a 70-year-old is more likely to be ill, there was no outcome that suggests that we should make it different for a 70-year-old to get a license. Whether it is because most of them were not getting a license, or whether it is because they drive more careful, Mr. President, there was not a evidence or a circumstance to say that a 70-year-old was a higher risk and by extension needed greater intervention. There was nothing to suggest that, Senator Gale. And so therefore, if there is no greater accident outcome for the 50 or the 60 or the 70 or the 80-year-old, why is it that you are making it a requirement, a line of resistance for a person that you don't see an outcome? Senator Braham, I don't see why that was so. It is a presumption of ill health that was unnecessary. The insurance will require. However, we have now implemented it to say to get a license, you must also have it. And over our collective experience, we have not seen additional accidents caused by 70-year-olds, right? So it seemed to me that if they have eye problem or if they have whatever we feel a 70-year-old will more likely have, they have taken efforts to correct that on their own. And so, well, yes, well, and I'm saying to you, Senator Braham, that to seek to correct an ill that doesn't exist and that impacts all the others. There's another age thing that I saw within it, where to be a driving instructor, you had to be at least 24. Why? Why would you have to be at least 24? You can have to have 2 years experience, which is in there. You can have to have exposure to training, which is in there. But what is the difference between a 25-year-old and a 24-year-old if the two of us went to school? And what's the... Sorry? No, but again, these are... Yeah, what's the basis? At least you could have said you have to be an adult, and since by definition a child go up to 30, then you have to be 30. What? Sorry? No, I'm saying if there are certain things you must achieve so as to be an instructor, so as being educated, what is the reason that in addition to that education, you have to have an age achievement? The next thing you're going to say to me, to be a doctor, you have to be 24. Now, if a person, bright and brilliant like Senator Braham, went to school and become a doctor at 21, what should disqualify him when he has now achieved what is necessary to say that he can capably be a doctor? If you can start driving at 18, a person by 24 would have driven 6 years. So therefore, what? You see, Olano, it is not our duty to defend what is before us. Because if you say experience, no, but let us discuss what you said. You said the experience. The only thing a 24-year-old can declare of experience is life experience. Because if he never started driving until he's 23, at 24 he doesn't have more driving experience than the person who started at 18 and is 23. So therefore, the assumption that you automatically, then the bill should say no less than 6 years driving experience. Exactly. Because 24 don't automatically do that. It don't sorry? No, I like understand too, because they read it as well.
That's not intended for...
Oh, it's not for understanding. It's for distraction. All right, no problem. Sorry. Yes. The other thing, so those two age things, I found no basis in outcome, previous outcome, for a law I don't know what the lawyers call it, what ill you're trying to correct. What's the mischief? What's the grievance? I saw no mischief that they were trying to correct. The other thing I found to be contrary, Mr. President, was the clause which says that a person who is buying a bike must at the same time buy a helmet from the person who is selling the bike. So the person who is selling the bike must ensure that upon purchasing the bike, you also purchase a helmet. Now, as a businessman in training, Senator Waby, what if I want to have a helmet store? There's no more need for a helmet store because, wait, no man, give me a chance, because you would have now spent on a bike and a helmet. Now, secondly, and more importantly, what if this is my second bike? If this is my second bike, where the first bike is no longer in operation, what do I do with my first helmet? Now, you already put in the law that if the oh, Jesus Christ. I mean, yeah, man, but I don't mind the input, but if the input no sensible, that distract me, man.
Yeah, man, that's their purpose.
I'm saying that there is, for some reason I don't understand, a tying of buying a bike from a supplier of bike simultaneously and necessarily with getting a helmet from the same man. If this is my second bike and I already have a helmet, why would I have to buy an helmet when you already say in the law operating the bike without a helmet is an offense? There's nothing to defend in that. It's a reasonable question that might have a reasonable answer. But the answers I've been told is not reasonable. What if I have a special type of helmet that I want to use? Or I can get the helmet cheaper.
Or custom made.
Or a better quality helmet. Or what if my auntie or foreign send me a helmet? All of those things make this part be unnecessary because you cannot.
No, man.
Hello, members on both sides, please allow the senator to continue his contribution.
Mr. President.
In silence.
Mr. President, the risk that exists in a operation of a motorcycle is in the operation of the cycle without an helmet, not in the purchase of the cycle without an helmet. The law already speaks to the operation and the negative outcomes from the operation. One could increase the penalty, one could increase the negatives, but one does not have to tie the purchase of a bike to the purchase of an helmet at the same exact place, at the same. It's anti-competitive.
What section is that? What section?
Don't tell you, Mr. President, it's my last work. I know you want to, but I had it. Yeah. Yes. It's out of memory. But yes, please find the section for me. So therefore, you have to operate the bike with your helmet, because I can get a bike last month, crash the bike, and get a new bike, and now have two helmets. To whom? Nobody would need a helmet, because every time they have a bike, unless it is to do crash.
Hello, Senator Crawford.
All right, yes, I'm sorry, Mr. President.
Calm down, man.
All right, Mr. President. Yeah, no. All right, yes. No, I feel strongly about the unwillingness to understand, because maybe it was overlooked at some of the circumstances that could right. So unless my only duty is to agree in totality, then allow me to say what is the basis of disagreement. And if there's a reasonable answer, I'm sure the capable leader of government business will get it from the persons who participated in the previous conversations and indicate what that reasonable answer is. But I find that that was unnecessary, and that was actually likely to be counter to what we're trying to achieve. One of the best ways, Senator Bunting, we have found for things to be accepted by a society is to make it fashionable. Is to make him can get him name brand helmet, his Nike helmet and all these things. Louis Vuitton helmet and none of that.
Yeah, nice.
Right. Now forcing the man selling a bike to go into another business that he might not be capable to do. The other thing I found issue with, Madam Leader of Government Business, is the great requirements for quote-unquote a driving school. One of the things, Senator Braham, that you had to have a driving school was a police record. What is the aim? Now, if I want to use that as a marketing tool to say my driving school is safe, again, I'm saying, if I want to market my driving school as a driving school which have police record and guaranteed safety and all of that. No. Yes, but I'm saying that increased government control of the lives of the people with unnecessary means. The driving instructor based on this bill should be able to teach a person how to drive. If a man did thief some aki, or in the hustle some weed, or no, that's in the regulation. That a person must get to own the school, that a person must get a police record. Why is that so? I'm not saying a problem. I'm saying why is it there? What is the I'm saying that is just greater red tape that is unnecessary for a driving school. But let me move on to another one that might not have less controversy and resistance. Why he has to have a classroom for a driving school? Suppose I online me I teach my thing. Right. Why me have to have a classroom? Suppose I'm going to your yard and teach up on your veranda. What would be the reason that a regulation say that to have a driving school, I must have a physical classroom approved by KSAC? And what's the sense in that? What's it? Yeah, that's just a way now to make only 10 men have a driving school. So therefore, these are things. And the leader of government business herself accepted that the vast majority of learning experience happening in the family. It don't happen in the driving schools. So therefore, if you say that a driving school must have a trained instructor with a particular certification and a particular type of vehicle that operates in a particular type of way, understandable. But in today's day, that the Ministry of Education recently had summer school, the majority of the children was online. You're saying that I must have a physical classroom? Come on, that seems to be a overreach.
To the president.
I don't mind play cricket, but when yeah, you know. Yeah, but Mr. President, when the Olympics, I can't bother to compete with primary champs. It don't make no sense. We want a virtual car. What's that? Wow. Mr. President, PPV, with it, and it's not even them writing, so why them so upset? It's not them writing. PPV. Mr. President, there's a specific area for public passenger vehicle. And on the face of it, we're all in agreement, public passenger vehicle must be of great concern. However, the items that I saw within that area, in the main, wasn't reserved for public passenger vehicle. There was a item, I think, subsection 6, I don't want to get carried away, but it says that the gas must be put in from outside the vehicle. That does sound like every vehicle to me. It said that if it used screw, it must be fitted properly and it must be threaded. That sounds like every vehicle to me. So therefore, if these are things that every vehicle should have, why is there a section? There might be some, I didn't see any, but the ones that I read were that the chassis must be welded on both sides. That sounds like every vehicle. Should you allow a vehicle that is not a public passenger vehicle to drive with a half-welded chassis? I don't know. I'm not. I'm saying it seemed to be for all vehicles. Now, while it is that the public passenger vehicle, the owner and operator put more persons in the vehicle at risk. All vehicles put people at risk because you don't have to be in the vehicle to be a part of an accident. You don't have to be within the vehicle being operated to be a part of an accident. So I'm asking.
No, I thought that you had heard the warning on a number of occasions. The speaker's time has expired.
About 6 more points. But if
Mr.
people stop
Mr.
saying,
President, might the speaker's time having expired, might he be permitted to complete his presentation?
Members would have heard the question, no doubt, and also the sort of a response that he would need 6 minutes. But may the speaker be given time to complete his presentation.
No, I said 6 things, Mr. President.
Those in favor?
Yes, thank you.
Against? Thank you, Senator.
Mr. President, I want to make sure it is understood. I mean no ill will in my analysis. It's just the things. PPV. The other thing I saw, Mr. President, was the disabled use of the sidewalks. And Senator Floyd, immediately I said, but there must also be equal understanding that we need access to the sidewalks. A vast number of our sidewalks don't have the ramp access. And even those with ramp access, there's very limited rules of how what do you call that thing? The light posts and the other companies that use the road, how do they use the sidewalk? Sometimes you have a line around cross and the area and stuff like that. So access to the sidewalk is something that would be necessary for the implementation of how the disabled use the roads. Because it says, Senator Bunting and Senator Floyd Morris, that the disabled should use the sidewalk for whether hand-operated or motor, when the conditions of our sidewalk may necessitate the disabled using the road. Right? Now, we know that they have a copy, each of them have a copy of our manifesto on their decks. They can look to see where we said, reference 5% of the budget for what you call a capital budget, we believe should be dedicated to alleviating some of the issues being faced by the disabled in our yes. No, they didn't see that one. Yes, we are having this problem. They don't have yes. I want them to copy that one. So 5% from the capital budget so that this can be properly implemented. The other thing we saw, Mr. President, of concern was the learner's license. And rightfully we are concerned especially of motorbikes using a learner's license in perpetuity. However, what was suggested as the solution seems unreasonable and unlikely to work. It says that a person with a learner's license operating a motorcycle, Senator Bunting, should have 6 meters or 6 feet away another person on another motorbike who is his trainer. Now, if they have on a helmet, it means that there's no way they can communicate because it's a telephone. Same can use in two-way radio, which you shouldn't be using while using a motorbike. And the person who is riding, whether at the front or the back, should be focused on the road. So how would he give signal instruction to the person? So therefore, if you say that a learner's license is valid for 3 months and a person cannot operate on his 3rd learner's license without getting a real license, I don't know the answer, but the answer cannot be that to say, oh, we're going to arrest you because you don't have a instructor 6 meters or 6 feet away. I would hope his feet, but even so, it is ridiculous. And that they are somehow going to give you instruction. This is impossible. In fact, anybody who ever tried to learn how to ride, the person teaching you is on the bike. and the person being on the bike is holding one of the clutch thing and trying to teach you how to ride. So therefore, to say that the learner should not have a person on the back is actually counter to how people learn how to ride. So I don't, it's things that make you go, Submit vehicle. There's a clause that says that at any point you perceive that the vehicle is operating in contravention of a license, that the police can ask you to submit the vehicle. Now, I love how the leader of government business is agreeing with me, taking the notes, sending it out. Madam Leader of Government Business, you also said that every vehicle must remain registered. Good. So to submit suggests to take it to the area of analysis. If to submit the vehicle, and I might be incorrect, I'm saying the term submit should be changed to make available, because if my vehicle is not operational and you get a report, incorrect or otherwise, to give you the assumption that I am operating it, then to ask me to submit now, saying I might have to go get RECA, this, that, to make available means say I can come and check it. Right. To say, oh, it's not operational, whatever. Right. So yes, I'm just saying, you're a lawyer, you understand it better than I, and the words are important. When I read the term submit, I understood to take it in. And because you're saying that that vehicle wasn't necessarily stopped on the road by the police or anything, it says any reason to presume it is being used, which could mean a call. I'm saying maybe we should look at to. I'll find it and send to you. Yes. I'll find it and send to you. Right. I'll find it. Yes. Right. Remember, all of we couldn't read all the pages, so the ones I read different from the ones. Right. I don't have my notes. Demerit points, and I didn't understand some of the things that you said, but there's a lot of areas of 10 but under 15, 15 but under 20. For 15 months, the demerit points would stay, and then it would be removed. But if you get all of those things, but I am trying to understand, when a demerit point is expunged, how does the insurance company respond, or how should they respond? Because it would be unreasonable if the insurance company had access to my information on demerits, use it to impact my insurance fees into perpetuity. So therefore, when it is expunged, what is the instruction, to the insurance company of how to deal with me having now, after a year and a half or 3 years, or what is the period that the insurance company can continue to consider the points that I have earned as a basis? So when you look, for example, you said, and the bill said as well, that in particular if you were suspended, that suspension basically remains in perpetuity. And I believe that is unreasonable. If at 20 I was on a joyride, you're telling me that at 35, when now I am responsible and acting differently, that my 20 infringement of a road, not a murder, of speeding, remains and is considered into perpetuity against my life? Yes.
Hello, Senator.
Yes. No, he's teaching me. It's the first I'm learning something from all of our
No, but what I'm pointing out is that you have exceeded your time, and Senator Campbell is delaying you further. Please.
Yeah, but
don't
Mr.
be
President,
distracted.
the most important part is not the time. It's the bill. It's the
most
regulation.
important part for me right here now is the time still.
All right.
Between
well, what I've heard, Mr. President, is your actions at 20 might actually be an indicator of how you will act at 30. However, with 10 years of not having acted in that way, I think it is reasonable to suggest that you have learned your lesson. And that lesson might come from, you see, that's a reasonable man. He says, good point. But that lesson might come from having had a ticket or having had a suspension in the first place. I don't believe perpetuities are reasonable. Now, it might be 10, it might be 15, but I'm saying that we should, especially because there is almost a lifetime cost of the insurance company using it as a basis of further profiteering against the individual who has acted properly for 20 years, but still continue because of his 40 years. Mr. President, with some of the things I see in the bill going towards the owner, it seems to me that there should be a method for a driver's record in the same way that a police record should be submitted to me as an owner. If I am running my little taxi, and many people have them individual taxi, and I hire in a driver, if I am at risk, a man should be able to request his driver's record and carry to me like a police record for me to see that him before me hire him. The same criminal records office, online, all these things, but it is not considered. It is exposing people to a risk of just a man telling him say he's a great driver. Now, if I'm going to take on that risk, which the good leader was very eloquent in suggesting, that the owner of the car in other jurisdictions is the one who has the risk. Now, other jurisdictions don't operate culturally like how we operate with 50,000 people with a car on the road, even the America Bank. But that's the reality. So with us knowing our reality, I think a person should be able to request his driver's record so that he can present it to the hiring individual who now is taking on that risk to the thing. And we also have some people who rent car and all them thing. A man should be able to say that, present me your thing. I don't think it is difficult because, as I said, the insurance company can find it and other things like that, right? The final thing, Mr. President, who's at the ready, is we have to consider how other actions of government impact the use of a law. And the taxi operators are the ones most exposed because of their high use of the road. Not because of their bad use of the road, but the high use means that you are more likely, or probability increases of you being an afoul of the law. One of the realities that we face is the setting of pricing for taxi operators, a set of fare. And in most cases, that fare is equal to the JUTC fare, and we know the JUTC have to be subsidized by government continuously. So the taxi operators, it seems, and they suggest that they almost have to make 50 trips on a 20-trip day in an effort to make sufficient revenue to be alive. And so therefore we have to consider some of these things that make a man almost feel it necessary to break the law because of other rules that were put in place. A reasonable price for transportation cannot be one that is subsidized by government for their entities. Right. The Minister of Finance said he doesn't believe in price setting for the banks, but he believes in price setting for the taxis. He didn't say that, but I'm saying the reality is right. So I'm saying that when a taximan have to charge a price to get a reasonable revenue, he have to then now increase his quantity. And in that effort, not protecting him, not suggesting it's correct, they have misused the roads. And so we have to now consider that price-revenue relationship so that they don't feel the need to be lawbreakers. So, Mr. President, with that, I thank you, and that's my...
Thank you to Senator Crawford. Thank you. 1 minute, please. Just 1 minute. Thank you, Senator Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Longmore. Senator Gale, give me a second, please.
Mr. President, my intervention will be very brief, but I had to rise to address something of critical importance with respect to this regulations that we're looking at and the Road Traffic Act generally. And, you know, Senator Crawford, we were making comments around some of the arguments that you put forward. Being trained in behavior change, there is significant research that reflects that people use things when it is available to them. And if the sale of one helmet concomitant with the sale of a motorcycle will save one life, because that individual will be encouraged to use that helmet because they have it in their possession, I will vote for this just to ensure that that one life is saved. There is absolutely no question in my mind that the sale of a motorcycle without the enforced sale of a helmet does not encourage the use of that helmet. On the other hand, the sale of a motorcycle with the sale of the helmet certainly encourages the use of that helmet, and that is what we're hoping to encourage. So that is that I could pick a couple other points that you raised, but I think we have a lot to get to on our agenda. What I wanted to bring to our attention is a 2016 survey that brought information that 17%, and this is a national drug use prevalence survey done by the National Road Safety Council, that indicated that 17% of males, and at that time 7.3% of females, admitted to driving under the influence of a substance and operating a vehicle. So this is why, thank you, Senator Graham, because that's why I brought this, because this was a 2016 survey. The decriminalization of marijuana in 2015 has been shown to have increased use, especially amongst our young people. And the unfortunate reality is that a lot of what Senator Waby spoke to in terms of the medical and healthcare consequences of road traffic accidents is significantly related to substance use. A lot of persons who end up in these very grave accidents are under the influence of not just alcohol, but cannabis that significantly alters one's perception and coordination. The very same product that I spoke of earlier today, psilocybin, the increased use of that, which also affects our perception, is happening in Jamaica. And so with our consideration as we put these regulations in place, there has been calls for significant education around the operations of motor vehicles in our society. And I implore us that we focus especially on drug driving. Schedule 5 in the Act actually relates to this, but it is of significant importance that we recognize, especially with the decriminalization of marijuana that happened in 2015, there's increased use, there's an increased occurrence of its presence in the emergency rooms when we analyze the persons who are coming in. And the fact is that we need to associate great importance to this to our people. Just like we have when we're talking about anti-smoking campaigns and we have the ads that show the consequences, I think we need to see more of this out there because visual works. And so, Mr. President, it is that significant point that I want to add to our discussion today, that in all our consultations, I truly believe that prevention is the best cure, and prevention is always better than treatment. And so if we emphasize the safe use of our roads, we must also emphasize the control and the implementation of a public education program around substance use while driving. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Longmore. No, 1 minute. Thank you, Senator Longmore. Senator Bunting.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just before I go into my prepared remarks, I just use the opportunity to respond to Senator Longmore's point about the marrying the helmet, marrying the helmet, the sale of the helmet with the sale of the bike. If it would save one life, she would support it. And I understand the sentiment behind that. I think the intention might be a noble intention.
But as we develop policy, particularly policy around road safety, we must understand that there is always a balance that we're trying to achieve, Mr. President.
Not driving save many lives.
If we made a speed limit on our highways 30 kilometers per hour, I'm sure it would save more than one life. But what would be the network, the systemic effect of that in terms of productivity, reducing our GDP, our per capita income, and ultimately all the lives that would be lost in future by us having a much lower per capita GDP and much less funds available for healthcare, etc. So we have to be careful, not to be absolutist in our approach and understand that good policy making is always a balance between competing interests and determining what is the best in terms of the public interest. Mr. President, I want to start by commending Dr. Lucian Jones and the team at the National Road Safety Council. But I want to, Senator Brown, go back even a little more in history, because you may recall that the whole idea for the National Road Safety Council came from a paper written for the Medical Association of Jamaica by Professor Sir John Golding. And I believe he was the first vice chairman of the Road Safety Council, which started about 30 years ago. And he, of course, was in a unique position to see the impact, the health impact, in particular the orthopedic impact that road accidents were having, particularly as a lot of the victims who survived ended up at the Mona Rehab Center. Now, Mr. President, I went back and I looked at the road fatalities for the last 20 years or so. And what you see is that between 2003 and 2018, each year, the number of road fatalities fell within the 300 to 400 range. With one exception. 1 year while I was minister, it went down to as low as 260. But for the 20-year period, it stayed, generally speaking, within the 200 to 300 range. Then in 2019, Minister Chang introduced or launched the new GSF branch called the Public Safety and Traffic Enforcement Branch, PSTEP. Yes, it was launched, you will recall, there were scores of new high visibility yellow motorbikes. I'll use a politically correct term. What the average man said were green bikes, but scores of new high visibility yellow motorbikes.
That's what he said.
And cars were paraded at the launch, and then for weeks after, our major intersections were festooned with these bikes and cars.
What festooned?
Festooned, adorned with these. So we saw them parked up on the side, and it was very evident. It was a great PR exercise, I would say, for the launch. But what we see is that since that launch, every year since, the road traffic fatalities have moved from the 300 to 400 range to the 400 to 500 range. In 2019, the year of its launch, road fatalities increased to 440. There were 389 but the year before. 2020, 433. 2021, 487. The highest for 2 decades. And when I checked with the fatalities up to July 24th this year, it was running at the same pace as last year. we no longer see the festooning of the intersections with these high visibility vehicles. However, it is a strong correlation between the launch of these public safety and traffic enforcement branch with a fairly dramatic increase in the number of fatalities that we have on the road. Now, I'll quickly say correlation is not causation. However, we would have expected to see a downturn in road fatalities and traffic accidents after the marquee launch of this new branch. And if we use either, because what we want to talk about here, and my colleague Senator Waby says I like to speak about things being data driven. So let me use some data. What we want to use to assess whether this new branch had the impact, the positive impact that was intended, whether we use fatalities from violent crime, because we could say public safety would also include violent crime in our public spaces, violent crime, or from road accidents. Either one would suggest that this new branch has been an abject failure. Abject failure. But tons of resources, millions and millions of dollars spent putting it in place. The truth of the matter is, it turns out that this was all PR from a PR government. If we're serious about road safety and public safety, what we really need to do is to take a safe system approach. Safe system has 5 elements. It has, the first element is safe road users. That includes both pedestrians, drivers, passengers. Now, one of the things we know, and this is not recent, this is not since the launch of PSEB, but this is over time, we know that there is a great deal of corruption in the issuing of driver's licenses. I would say, based on my anecdotal survey of persons who have general licenses, and I don't think they were going to give this to Dan Anderson or any formal pollster, but just when I question them, how did they drive for it or did they pay for it? The vast majority is just paid for it. They never turned up at the driver examination depot at all. This is not a today problem. This is a historical problem. But no matter what we put in the regulations or in the law, because it was in the law before, if we don't enforce that law that drivers or aspiring drivers must take the exam, whether the written or the driving exam, and demonstrate competence rather than touch a man and get through, then we're still going to have, notwithstanding this thick book of regulations, we're still going to have the fatalities. Similarly, the second element of a safe system is safe vehicles. Legend, again, many of us know that a whole ton of vehicles get passed without ever going to the depot for examination. No matter the regulations we have here about the vehicles, unless we address the examination and the enforcement of these regs, then the second element of the safe system will be frustrated. The third element is safe speeds. No matter the seatbelt or the airbag or the helmet, most traffic fatalities come from the transfer of kinetic energy. It's kinetic energy transfer. If you are going at 50 miles per hour and you go into a solid wall or a head-on with another vehicle, no matter how you're restrained and airbag, just that transfer of kinetic energy is going to tear up your internal organs and you will be a fatality. The JCF has the responsibility, this public safety and traffic enforcement branch in particular has responsibility to regulate the speeds, the safe speeds on our roads. And that is not happening, and that is what is causing the majority of fatalities. And this transfer of kinetic energy is not just for the person in the vehicle. It's transferring from the vehicle to the pedestrian when they have an impact. And you might be surprised to know it is virtually impossible for a pedestrian to survive an impact over 30 kilometers per hour, just because of the transfer of kinetic energy from the vehicle to the pedestrian. The fourth element is safe roads. And there are so many things that we could do to make our roads safer. And I, in particular, recall having a student, a young girl, knocked down, fatally knocked down, near an intersection, coming from NCU, going back to Mandeville, just at the corner where you turn to Mayday. And it is one of these hot spots. Repeatedly, it's a long straight road, vehicles are coming fast, but there's an intersection, so people are coming out of the side, taxis are dropping off pedestrians, particularly students, to cross the road to get onto the other side. And we agreed with the safety unit that Kedyut here used to head. He visited. We agreed with the NWA. We agreed. NCU even agreed to give some land for free to put a roundabout that would compel drivers to slow down. The roundabout in the middle of that long stretch. And it would also allow taxis to go around to drop off the passengers on the side of the road where they were going, particularly the children, so they would not have to cross the road, and then re-enter the roundabout and continue in the direction to Mandeville. Was all agreed this was the solution. This was 5-6 years ago. Nothing has happened. So we have to design our roads to be safe. And that is also another thing. Too many of our road services, just a little drizzle of rain, and you know, people say it becomes like okra. It's very, very slippery, and you again, the hot spots are well known across the island. But the final element that, frankly, will not be addressed, no matter how good the regulations and the laws, is the post-crash care. Emergency first responders must quickly locate the crash victims, stabilize their injuries, and transport them to medical facilities where they can get better treatment. Now, we really don't have that system in place. We had a policeman who died recently. And even though, you know, I'm not debating whether they were delayed at the toll rather, for any length of time. But the truth of the matter is, it was another police vehicle that had to go and search for the victims who had run off the highway or the exit of the highway, were in the bush. It was at night. It took a long time. When they did get them, these were not persons trained in emergency medical service. They were not paramedics. And we really need many, many more ambulances, or the firemen who had been trained, the emergency medical service at critical points, particularly on the highways. Because of the medians, it takes long to go around and come back and be able to locate those persons. So these are the elements that we need if we really want to see a dramatic improvement, or a dramatic reduction in our road fatalities. Legislation, regulations, These are necessary, but these are not sufficient to solve the chaos on our roads and the high level of fatalities we're getting now. Last year, it's 16 fatalities per 100,000. This is a very high rate. A few years ago, we were 10 per 100,000. So we're moving in the wrong direction. You know, Senator Crawford, you're a lecturer at the university. You probably know who the author is better than me, but I think it was Peter Drucker, one of the gurus on strategy, said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Was it? And if I was to paraphrase him in terms of what we're doing today, I would say corruption eats policy for breakfast. No matter what legislation we pass, no matter what regulations we pass, if we don't fix the problems of persons getting driver's license without driving for them, getting vehicles passed without going through the proper forensic examination, getting the police, but also all other users to ensure that they reduce the speeds on the roads and travel within the regulated speeds until we make some investment in safer roads themselves and in post-crash care, we will not bring the level of road fatalities down to what might be considered a minimal or acceptable level. So I support the regulations. I mean, there are some issues with a few in general, but I want to caution, by themselves, there's no silver bullet, there's no magic wand. We need all those other elements combined to really see a dramatic improvement and stop going in the direction that we are, where we're seeing more and more, a trend towards more and more road fatalities every year. A final comment, Mr. President, I would just make on the regulation 163 subsection 2, which speaks to the renewal of a driver's license for persons 70 years and older. And, you know, I think I understand the reasoning behind it. Obviously, your reflexes get slower, your eyesight and hearing, generally speaking, tend to deteriorate as you get older. So I understand the thinking behind it. But an advocate for the elderly pointed out that it might be better to have it on the basis of a competency testing. So, for example, if we require this medical certificate and the person at 70 gets a medical certificate that said, look, this person medically is the equivalent of a 50-year-old person. Why should we still require them to come back in 3 years instead of coming back in 5 years? So, well, it could change for any of us in here at any age, right? Can change for... And in fact, again, if we want to come back to the data, the safest group of drivers are those who are over 60. The safest group, to the extent when you have an over 60 fatality, it is typically the person was a pedestrian. And maybe they couldn't scurry out of the way of the reckless driver in time. But if we really want to target a group, we should have more frequent testing. It is the younger drivers. It is the 20 to 30-year-olds, perhaps, or who you know, should be subjected to more scrutiny. But, you know, I'm not going to make a big issue of it, but it's just that we keep putting obstacles in the way of older persons without necessarily, we're generalizing. And it is really discriminatory, and it puts unnecessary hurdles in front of them. And I have an aunt who drove safely to about 90, and then I think they insisted that they were not renewing her license, even though she had never got a ticket, she had never got in any accident, she had never caused any accident that we know of. But, you know, obviously 90 is fairly advanced, so I wouldn't argue with that. But she was competent up to that point, by all accounts.
So if we had put an extra burden on her for the last 20 years, it would have seemed, certainly to her, it would have seemed unreasonable. And I think it is something that we have to be sensitive to as our population pyramid inverts. And we get more and more, a higher and higher percentage of our population going into this category of older person or older adults. Then we need, I think, to be more sensitive in the accommodation that we make for them. A lot of these cutoffs, for example, asking persons to retire at 65, when these conventions were established, if you were 65, you were expected to live to 70. You were expected to die by the time you were 70. Today, you know, for somebody who is 70, their conditional life expectancy may be 86 or 87. So they have, you know, considerable more living to do, and we don't want to make it unproductive for them because we put so much obstacles in their way. So with those few words, Mr. President, I conclude my contribution.
Thank you, Senator Bunting. Minister? Senator Fraser-Vance.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you to our colleagues who participated so robustly in the debate before us. Clearly, well, we're about to take the 120 motion, but until then, just permit me to start addressing a few of the points made, and be assured that the technical team has taken good note of those which may merit reconsideration at a further date. As indicated, and as has always been the state of circumstances where we treat with regulations, and in fact, I had said it last week, that where it is that there are matters of substance that may still need to be addressed, we should take note of them so that they can be reviewed, because there are aspects of the regulations which require affirmative resolution. Those would require coming back to Parliament, but there are those matters which, for a reason of efficiency and effectiveness of processes, which is an absolutely critical part of government functioning, that they don't come back. And where those can be addressed, they will reasonably be so addressed. And that, so it's always good to air the concerns which persons have. On the matter of braking mechanisms, hydraulic lifts for PPVs, which were raised by Senator Morris, I make the point in that context because the orders in respect of equipment will not have to come back here, because clearly this Parliament has no technical capacity to assess the effectiveness or the appropriateness of such orders. So they will stay where it's appropriate for them to be addressed, which is within the ministry, where technical advice will be taken, the orders will be issued and treated with as orders are generally in government. If Parliament were to have oversight of every order that were issued by way of negative or affirmative resolution, absolutely nothing would get done. And while we recognize that there are persons who are comfortable with nothing being done, I would think that certainly in respect of these regulations, that could not be the position one would wish to take. In respect of parking spaces, just to make note as well, and I'm quite sure Senator Morris's colleagues will also will update him on that matter. Again, as had been indicated when it was raised in the original debate, that is the debate on the Principal Act, we had discussed the fact that there were differing jurisdictions and parking spaces are not only managed by the municipal authorities and therefore not appropriate for addressing here under these regulations, they're also owned privately and have to be treated with separately. So those would not have been intended for these regulations, although they are to be addressed. On the matter raised in respect of the offence to propose an improper use of the filter lane, I'm sure the team is assessing whether that needs to be a separate offence or whether it is actually something that can be captured under offences already provided for in the regulations and within the Act itself, a broader provision. We note the need for consideration of the point, because it is a significant danger to users of the road. On the matter of wearing helmets and the role of employers, I want to just support and share the view that in enforcement, the role of employers in insisting that the drivers within their employ follow the rules of the road and observe safe practices will in fact come back to the owners as well, because ultimately the enforcement mechanisms within the regime make liability stop at the owner of a vehicle. So it is actually quite an important point, not only from the immediate obvious of saying it must be in the interest for you to have safe employees conducting their business safely, but certainly to ensure that from enlightened self-interest, if nothing else, their role in enhancing the compliance, that would be important. Just to speak to the point about arrangements with private entities in respect of the use of electronic devices for the purposes of surveillance. This is already in place. It is what is done with Jamaica Eye. The government enters into arrangements with private sector entities or indeed individuals for permission to use the footage from their electronic devices, their cameras, in order to broaden the monitoring reach of the government, and that is exactly what is contemplated here, and there are further provisions that are found just a bit further on in that section, I think 142. The matter of refunds, clearly very important, and one that I think needs to be looked at from an administrative perspective, from a justice perspective. On the issue of demerit points and expungement. So the demerit points are expunged and treated with, will be treated with by insurance companies that use their algorithms for their assessment of your risk. The suspensions remain because there must be a record of the fact that you have transgressed at a level of seriousness that has had your license suspended for a year, for a period of time. So even though you return to zero on your demerit points for small offenses until you reach a point where your license is suspended, the fact that you have reached that point cannot simply be removed. And so, you know what struck me? I thought to myself, the concern of Senator Crawford is that the conduct will continue to be a cost to the perpetrator, the person who lost their license, who had their license suspended. We don't know who was injured, who was maimed in the accident. We don't know any of those things. We don't know what caused it, what damage was inflicted, causing what cost to other taxpayers to rebuild road and lampposts, and what community had to do without light because them licked down the post. We don't know any of that, but you know that there was a serious enough infraction or the accumulation of sufficiently repeated infractions to result in the suspension of a license. That remains in the register and should remain in the register. I don't see a rationale for its removal from the register. And I think it is important that what we use the time here is to say to people, it's serious business now, be responsible. It's not okay to just go on a youthful joyride and say, boy, because a man did a speed, I used to speed and now I don't speed no more. The insurance companies can, of course, assess your risk. They can, of course, assess your risk. But it is important. It is important that we use this platform in here to speak about safe use of the roads. So when Senator Bunting, just to ask Mr. President, the time being 1:20, that the Senate be allowed to sit beyond 1:30 to complete the business of the day.
You should have heard the question. Those in favor? Against? Thank you, Minister.
Thank you. So Senator Bunting just spent quite a bit of time speaking about the various supporting elements that are needed to ensure that there is a reduction in road safety and a system and changing a culture of safety. So I'm saying that what we need to do is use our voices to promote that culture, not to say, why are we making laws? Why are we making laws when we know our culture is for a man to have 10 car a road and not know who I drive? Well, what we need is to say to people, it's a different day now. So now you need to ensure that you are clear on who you are giving your car to drive. You need to say to that person that they need to be safe on the road. You need to promote safe driving, safe use of the road, because it can follow you. It's not enough to say you're going to drive and you're not going to insurance, because you cannot renew anything. And that the penalty for so doing, the penalty for placing people's good children in jeopardy every day on the road. And I mean that in the widest sense possible. I mean that to cover all of the young people, the children we're reading about in the paper as at today. As at today. People with their whole entire life ahead of them. Senator Campbell, I don't know if you read about the member of the diaspora down here having a vacation with her twin sister, has a successful business, sharing Jamaican food in Illinois. I mean, and she's just here on vacation, written off because of speeding. We have to recognize it's a different day. The chaos is not stopping without us helping with the message. The laws and the regulation cannot seek to embed what is. We have to change it. We have to change the culture, Mr. President. And we have to play our role, use our voices, use our influence. You know, we need to get there, and we can get there together. The matter of the driver's record is actually a very important point, because at this point, only companies can seek the information, and clearly only companies will not be affected, and that is something that therefore has to be looked at. The ability to get a driver's record, it's too limited at this point, but it is present in the regulations. It needs to be expanded. So that is something that I'm absolutely signaling that needs to be addressed. And also just wanting to make the point that PSTEB is an excellent concept, it's an excellent department, it is properly resourced. It needs this act, it needs these regulations, it needs the ticketing system to work, and it needs us behind. That system was not a failure. The act, the rolling out of the regulations, everything that was intended to support that framework did not occur in the time when it should have. And so we continue to ensure that we do our part. Public education, thank you, Senator, just before I take my seat, Mr. President, because this will be my last point. So public education will be critical. And I very much remember the day when I closed the Road Traffic Act and spoke with every conviction about the 3-month period that would be used to implement a public education campaign before the regulations came in. As I stated last week, and those who weren't present wouldn't have heard my reference, it has taken too long, but it is here. The regulations are here. We need to start that public education campaign. We know Minister Shaw has been speaking about that publicly, so we anticipate that the work is also happening within the ministry to prepare for that to be done, and the regulations need to come into effect as soon as possible. Mr. President, Jamaica is waiting for it. We know. So the Senate will have today done its part. We have identified concerns which the technical team can consider. We have also highlighted things that we believe are important for the public to know. And we expect that the ministry will now take this forward with its stakeholders as they work through their implementation plan, as there is an implementation plan, to ensure that the phasing is effective, that it is appropriate, that the partnerships that are critical to its success are engaged, and that in fact Jamaica can see a new day where discipline, law and order, a lack of aggression can start to unfold from the roads into other sectors of society. Mr. President, it is my question that the resolution and that indeed the regulations before us, the road traffic regulations 2022, be approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, and to all those who participated. The question is that the road traffic regulations 2022, that the motion asking for their approval be agreed. Those in favor? Aye. Against? It is my intention to rise until 2:15 to allow members of the staff to refresh themselves. So this Honourable Senate will rise until 2:15.
Violence against women and girls is a human problem, not just a woman's problem. It's a problem for men too. Gender violence takes many forms, including sexual assault, domestic violence, relationship abuse, sexual harassment, and sexual abuse of children. The magnitude of ongoing violence against women and children in our country is cause for alarm. We can end the violence. It requires all of us to end the violence. I call on all our men and women in Jamaica to take a stand. And men, especially, must get involved in this movement to create a better world for their daughters, their mothers, their sisters, their aunts, their uncles, their fathers, their sons, and for themselves. Let's protect and reassure. Let's unite to end gender violence.
It's Friday, July 29. In the headlines, Jamaica's 60th Festival Song winner announced. Regionally, CARICOM's judiciary heads discusses technology in the justice system. And internationally, UK engulfed in cost of living crisis. In sports, India versus West Indies 5-match T20 International Series. This is the news on PBC Jamaica. I am Simone Absalom Gale. The Crime Monitoring and Oversight Committee will meet with the Minister of National Security, Dr. Horace Chang, in early August to continue discussions with a view to look at effective monitoring of the government's national security initiatives. The meeting will also examine the realignment of the oversight framework to ensure that there is appropriate oversight and implementation program going forward. Minister of National Security Dr. Horace Chang and Chair of the Crime Monitoring and Oversight Committee, Lloyd Distant, met this week to discuss wide-ranging issues, various targets set via the consensus, as well as opportunities that currently exist for continued collaboration and dialogue to improve government legislative processes. Come September 22, Justice Leighton Pusey will lay down judgment on whether Roshane Barnett, who pleaded guilty on Thursday to killing his cousin and her 4 children last month, will receive the death penalty. Moments after he pleaded guilty, prosecutor Andrea Martin Waby told Judge Pusey that Director of Public Prosecutions Paula Llewellyn will accept his